All right, third graders, we are still going to be focusing on Amelia's Road, but now instead of the plot mountain, we are moving on to the author's perspective, which is how the author feels about the subject or the text, and the author's point of view, which is how the author has written the text. All right, let's look at the bottom of this slide where it says perspective. Perspective is the way you see something. Perspective is different for each person. It's very similar to a person's opinion. Now let's go to the very top of this slide, point of view. Point of view is the way in which the author allows you to see and hear the text. We've talked about first person before. It's a character telling the story. They usually use the words I, me, and my. And then third person is a narrator that's actually telling the story, or an outsider. It's not going to be where they have I, me, or my. All right, we're going to look at a couple examples. It doesn't really look the best, but I will be reading it to you and we'll be working on it together. Okay? Grandma Bonnie tied on her worn red and white striped apron and smiled brightly at Casey. Grandma helped her granddaughter remember which ingredients and how much of each. Grandma's hands carefully kneaded the bread and measured each ball of dough with such ease that Casey was hypnotized. Casey hoped she would be able to make bread like Grandma Bonnie someday. How does the author feel about Grandma, and how do you know? Well, we know that she is fond of grandmas. She says there's such ease. She's hypnotized by watching her knead the bread. Like, you can tell she's really into it. And I can tell that this is third person because I do not see the words I, me, or my. And it says Grandma Bonnie tied on her worn red and white striped apron. So I can tell that an outsider is reading this and or a narrator. Okay? All right, let's move on to the next slide. Again, I'm going to be reading it to you, so it's okay if it's hard for you to read. I'm going to scoot in just a little bit. Dad stepped in front of the television and clicked the off button. John hollered, "Hey, I was winning. Dad!" Dad silently pointed to the door, and John knew what he had to do. John's family had recently limited the amount of screen time they used, instead opting to spend more time outdoors. Dad always said, "I wanted children, not zombies." John headed outside, already missing his game. How does the author feel about technology and video games, and how do you know? Well, I know that the person loves video games and wants to do them all the time, but the dad has told him that he cannot do it all the time, that he only can do it for a period of time, and then he needs to come outside and enjoy the outdoors. I can tell that this is written in third person. Granted, I know it says I, however, it is in quotation marks, meaning that that person is speaking. So it is third person because it's talking about Dad and John. It doesn't say I other than when the person is speaking in quotation marks. Okay, let's look at this last one together. It's a little bit blurry, but I'm going to be reading it to you. Allison had heard from her brother that her new teacher, Miss Hesketh, was mean. She was so worried on the first day of school that her mom had to bribe her to get into the car. Now that she has gotten to know Mrs. Hesketh, she really likes her. Her teacher is funny and explains things well, even though she is strict. Sometimes she even brings to class her famous oatmeal cookies. Man, was her brother wrong. How does the author feel about teachers, and how do you know? Well, at first, they were kind of like, I'm not really sure about her. But then they ended up giving her a chance, and they got to know that she was great. So I think that they really like teachers based on reading this. And this is also in third person because it's talking about Allison and her teacher. Again, it does not say I, me, or my. So there is a narrator that is reading or that has written this, or an outsider that has written this. Okay, I'm going to show you your assignment today because I want to make sure that you will be able to manipulate the lines and boxes that I have made here for you. There is a direction box as well. Okay, so you're going to read about should kids have homework. I feel like we may have done this towards the beginning of the school year, but it has been so long that it's going to be okay whether we have or not. Otherwise, I did it last year. All right, the first box says, highlight the sentence where the author states her opinion. So granted, you are not going to highlight it, but you have this lovely red line over here, and when I click on it, it turns blue, and you are going to underline the sentence that you want. Now, the great thing about this line is that you can actually make it longer if you want it. Oops, let me click back on it. I made it a little bit longer. Or you can actually make it shorter. Okay, so you can manipulate it the way that you want to. Now, remember, do not click too many times because it will disappear for good. And if it disappears, the only thing that you can do is go to the undo button, which is an arrow that's kind of shaped the opposite direction, and that would be like the back arrow. Okay, so the only thing that you would be able to do would be the undo arrow. All right, the next box, the center box, says place a box around the sentences that best support her perspective. So again, I have these boxes already here for you. You're able to manipulate them, making them bigger, smaller, skinnier, longer, wider, etc. Okay, remember, do not manipulate them too much though, because it will disappear. Okay. And then over here on the right, it says Samantha's dad, Mr. Henry, disagrees with the author. List a reason why homework should be given that would help support Mr. Henry's view. So you're going to click where it says click here, and there you don't need to use the lines or the boxes, and you're just going to type probably just a one-sentence answer. Remember, it needs to be a complete sentence, okay? And then down at the very bottom, you are going to type your letter where it says type letter here since you're not able to circle it. So I just need to know whether you have chosen A, B, C, or D. You don't need to do process of elimination or any of that good stuff. Okay, so hopefully this is easier for you that I've made these boxes and these lines. Remember, you are able to manipulate them by clicking on top of them. You can make them longer, shorter, wider, skinnier, blah, 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 blah. Okay? All right. Enjoy.